afternoon. I am Dr. Sonia Williams, Chair of the Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Committee of the Faculty of Medical Sciences, MONA. On the behalf of our committee, I welcome you to this afternoon reflective conversation. I welcome all. I see that there are persons from various areas from within the university. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
I especially would like to welcome our Dean, Dr. Paul. If he's not here as yet, he will be here. He's here, Dr. Paul.
Thank you. Dr.
Yes. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We are honored. Miss Yolanda Paul, she's the acting director of the UWI MONA Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Unit here on the campus. And also a special welcome to Mrs. Marianne de Bruin Maxwell. She's the past director of UWI HARP and the past chair of the principal's technical working group on equity, diversity, and inclusion. Welcome all. These reflective conversations are part of the work of our diverse committee. When I say diverse, I mean diverse, right? Our committee, if you were to come to our committee meeting, you'll see how different we are, yet we are so similar. All right. It is our hope that our work will contribute to nurturing the culture of our institution in a way that equity, diversity, and inclusion are ingrained in everything we say and in everything that we do. That's what we're looking forward to. One day we will have it, right? This afternoon, our reflective conversation will focus on the topic of unconscious. These biases are prevalent and persons often hold them unintentionally, meaning that you don't even know that you are acting in a biased way. Our guest speaker this afternoon will help us to understand the phenomena and how it can affect our understanding, how it affects our actions, and how it affects our decisions, right? And decisions are decisions making in teaching and learning, decision making in the interaction between staff members, interaction between staff and students. Okay, we will now at this time receive our Dean's message.
Thanks very much, Dr. Williams. And let me welcome everyone also on behalf of the Faculty of Medical Sciences. Welcome all of you attending, our colleagues, our students, our members who are coming from outside of the university, but who are here with us this afternoon. And I thank you for the opportunity to say a few words, Dr. Williams. I'm very, very delighted to see us continuing on the work that we started some 4 years ago. This is coming to the end of my deanship this next month. And we had this reflective conversation, let's call it that, when we started. A lot of my reflection started with when I worked as a member of the technical working group, which Dr. Marianne de Bruin, one of our distinguished leaders in EDI, was chairing and has chaired, I should say, over time. And it was in that group that I had, I would say, a lot of reflections and eye-opening on the value and importance of the equity, diversity, and inclusion approach and issues. One of the things I learned in that group that I always say to people is that, you know, we talk about diversity and inclusion, and we say diversity is taking everybody to the party. And in this faculty, we have a big party. We have 7 undergraduate programs. We have we have 6 professional schools in the Faculty of Medical Sciences, not only medics, but nurses, physical therapists, pharmacists, radiographers. It's the full breadth, the dentistry program, and so on. And I felt that what a wonderful opportunity for us in our faculty to build diversity and inclusion. And what Marianne de Bruin and others taught me, Anna Perkins, Yolanda Paul, in that group, Bobby and the team, was that diversity is about going to the dance, the party. We just coming out of lockdown and we have opened up the doors for the dances and the party. Hope we don't dance too much. But going to the party, but inviting you to dance is about inclusion. And I think it was critical for me that we have within FMS this ED&I committee that would also attend to our needs, both within FMS and within the wider diaspora and the wider university campus community. So I'm so delighted, Dr. Williams. As I leave the deanship, I want to take this opportunity to say big thanks for building out the dance hall of FMS and building out the dance hall in a way that we can have a better party as we go forward and we can dance with each other even in a really meaningful way. I thank you for your work, your leadership, Dr. Williams. I thank the members of the team. We have a nice, diverse and inclusive committee working on ED&I, and it's really a pleasure today to have our dear colleague and friend, Dr. Anna Perkins, come and speak with us. So let's have a great evening, a great event. Look forward to hearing the talk. And thank you very much again for giving me the chance to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Paul. Those words are extremely uplifting. And it was a pleasure to take on this work. I will say to you, and you do know that when you asked me to take on the work, I didn't tell you yes and I didn't tell you no. And then I sat down and said, Sonia, but you did not really answer. You did not give an answer. And I decided that it was going to be yes, because there's no way that I was not going to do what my dean has asked me to do, especially the dean that we have, you know. So I took the bull by the horns, and sometimes I grabbed it by the tail and thought it was the horns, you know. But that means that we all within this committee, we all started from a background of not really having a background in equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we are learning as we're going along. And I will tell you that even with this afternoon session, that we also will be learning, right? And as we go forward, and I do look forward to continuing on in this committee until such time, whenever that time will be. So even though we're going to be or losing our dean, and I'm using the word losing because I wish he didn't have to go. I wish he was going to stay on for another 4 years. You know, we'd all be so happy. But we have to do what we have to do. Thank you, Dean Paul, for that address.
Welcome.
We will now have Dr. Lisa Lindo. She's a senior lecturer in the Department of Basic Medical Sciences, Biochemistry. She's also a member of the FMS ED&I committee. She will now introduce our guest. Dr. Lindo?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome. So it is my great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Anna Perkins. And she's no stranger to us. Everybody knows Dr. Perkins. But being a member of the FMS Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, we are going to be listening to this reflexive conversation that Dr. Perkins has really prepared for us. And I'm sure we are going to be enlightened by a lot of what she will have to say to us. Dr. Perkins is a senior program officer with the Quality Assurance Unit. She's of the Office of the Board of Undergraduate Studies, and she manages the Mona campus portfolio. She holds a doctorate in theological ethics. Who better to tell us all about this, right? From Boston College, and a postgraduate certificate in university teaching from UWI-Mona. Dr. Perkins teaches and researches in ethics, justice, popular culture, sexuality, theology, scripture, and quality assurance. And she supervises many postgraduate students. This shows that she has all the capabilities to help us in whichever area that we are lacking, right? Among her service to the university is her work as vice president of WIGOT, and we know that very well, that when we have a problem, we go for Anna Perkins as well. But she continues to serve on the UWI Ethics Committee, which is another big area, and the UE COVID-19 Task Force, and the Five Islands Campus Appointments Committee. I don't know where she finds time for all of this, but we're going to hear all about what Anna has to say to us. In the area of public service, Dr. Perkins is a commissioner of Broadcasting Commission of Jamaica, the BCJ, and she's the chair of the BCJ Licensing, Monitoring, and Compliance Subcommittee, a member of the Jamaican National Bioethics Committee, and a member of the Legal Aid Council Board. So we have even the legal aspect that is there for us to get all the news from her. She is a published author. Now, this is where it's very important. with her most recent publication being Ethics Amidst COVID-19. Now, we know COVID-19 has been affecting us quite a bit, and this is a very important aspect of where Ethics Amidst COVID-19 must be a really good, challenging book to read, a publication. A brief ethics handbook for Caribbean policymakers and leaders, and this was co-authored by Professor Landis. And she also had one on rough riding, and this is with Tanya Stevens and the power of music to transform society. And everybody knows that Tanya Stevens is one of our great singers. This was co-edited with Adwa Anura, hope I get that name right, and Ajamo Nangwaya. So I'd like us all to please, I know we can't make much noise with this virtual, but let us see how much we can make a noise so that we can welcome Dr. Perkins to tell us all about a bias consideration, hidden biases, and us in today's reflexive conversation. So please, let's welcome Dr. Perkins.
Dr. Lindo, Lisa, yes. Thank you very much for that introduction. I'm listening and thinking that woman is a Jill of all trades and probably a mistress of none, you know? but let's see which of those trades can help us in our conversation this afternoon. So saying thanks to you again, and thanks and welcome to everyone that has decided to join us for this conversation. Very special thanks to Dr. Williams and the other members of the FMS EDNI team who, you know, have issued this invitation. Special thanks to Dean Paul. Under his leadership, you know, this particular subcommittee has done wonderful work in the time that it has been together. And he's been a wonderful colleague and friend, also working along with us in our working group, the Principals Working Group for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. I'm healing up my DNI working group colleagues, so I think one or two of them are here. I don't know if I should even hail them up because they got me into this. And I'm trying to think, but Marian, I see you, and good to have you. And I see so many other faces and colleagues and friends who are out to support the conversation, and the conversation we hope it will be. So thank you very much. I see Izzy. Hi, Izzy Boo. Good to see you all. All right, colleagues, let me see if I can share my PowerPoint, and then we can start our conversation. All right, good to go. So I've done my pleasantries, and thank you all for having me again. And Dean Paul, Dr. Williams, I got a real significant confirmation last Friday about the timeliness of our conversation and the importance of what we're doing. This is what landed in my mailbox. And I think I see Dr. Sandra Palmer among the colleagues who are here this afternoon. Dr. Palmer, good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining. This showed up in my inbox, and I was thrilled beyond belief because this is an invitation to a workshop that's being put on by Above and Beyond, which some of you may know is the management consultancy company that Dr. Palmer and Dr. Samad run together. And so they're offering this 1-hour seminar on unconscious bias in the workplace next week for a very small investment. And Sandra, I think you might need to pay us a consideration because I'm doing a little plug here for your upcoming seminar.
Thank you.
I love it. They say for a small investment of $99 US, we can learn a bit more about what unconscious bias is and how to work it through in our lives and make our workplaces a better space. But more importantly, Sandra is offering you, if you register, the chance to win an all-inclusive vacation to Jamaica of all places. So if you're interested, you probably can talk to her afterwards and learn about how to get that and get the certification that comes with it. But seeing this invitation and the others that have followed, I realized that we were onto something, that great minds do think alike, and maybe we ought to pay attention to this whole thing about hidden, implicit, unconscious bias. what is it? And why are we investing our time and attention today? And why do we need to consider it? So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what we mean when we talk about displaying hidden bias, how it affects our understanding, our actions, and our decisions in an unconscious manner. And I know many of us think, but I don't really hold any kind of biases against anyone. In fact, I'm very strongly committed to treating everyone equally and deliberately trying to work at acting without prejudice here. And what I want to suggest is that even when we try our best to act in ways that are not prejudiced, we could still be acting out of hidden negative biases that we're not even aware of. So it's kind of fantastic that we decided all to come together today and have this conversation, because it really gives an idea that we're willing to examine what possible biases could be a part of our psychological makeup. And that's an important step to us understanding it and taking steps to control and to mitigate it. Of course, I have to give you a disclaimer right at the beginning and get a couple of things clear. I am not a scientist. I am not a psychologist. In fact, I don't consider myself to be any kind of expert in the field. So as Dr. Linda would have mentioned as she introduced me, I'm an ethicist by trade, and I dabble in quality assurance, right? So an ethicist has concerns with a couple of things that I think are particularly relevant to our conversation today. As an ethicist, I'm interested in character formation, which is who are we at the core of our personality, the core of ourselves. I'm also interested in action, the things that human beings do. What do we think? How do we feel? So I'm asking questions about choice, about behavior. And then all of that leads into justice and the concern with the kinds of communities that we're creating and the kinds of communities that we're a part of. Because by being a part of a community, who we are and what we do actually helps to create or to shape that community. So I recognize that today's conversation is actually ticking a couple of those boxes for me. And I was happy for the opportunity to just sort of delve into this area and learn some more, and then come and share it with anybody who is willing to listen, and let's see how we can learn together. So that brings me to outcomes, objectives. You know, what will we do when we're done? And I put done in quotation marks because I don't expect that we really are going to be done. It's a conversation and we're starting. So the first two things are really easy. I need you to remember three letters, ICM, and I need you to remember three words. I can marzipan. I can marzipan. And those two link into the takeaways that I'm hoping we'll be able to do at the end of the day. I want us to start our journey or conversation on hidden biases, help us to identify what those are. I then want us to think through and perhaps commit to controlling the biases that we identify as part of our psychological makeup, and then to take every attempt that we can to mitigate the effects of hidden bias on the decisions that we make, which ultimately will impact the lives of all the persons that we interact with. And we know that that's particularly important in the space where we work and in the spaces where we play, because our actions do impact the lives of people. And we want to make sure that where we can, our actions actually lead to human flourishing rather than to human destruction or damage or wilting. So I can marzipan, and we're talking about identifying, committing to controlling, and mitigating the effects of hidden bias. All right, I want us to start off with a visualization exercise, and it's one that I've adapted from Valerie Alexander. She's a lawyer, she's an author, and she's a CEO of an American tech company. And she gave a really brilliant TED Talk on how to outsmart our own unconscious bias. So adapting. I need you to close your eyes. I need you to focus, and I need you to visualize. I need you to form a picture in your mind of the people that I'm going to describe. So go ahead and close your eyes and just listen to me, describe a scenario or two, and form an image in your mind, and then we can talk about it a little bit later on. All right. So you're in the airport and you're rushing to catch a flight. You dash down the jetway and you make it on the plane the last minute, just before they close the door. and then you catch your breath. And then the pilot steps out of the cockpit and greets you. You find a seat, plane take off, and you make your way to your destination, and you get to your hotel, you're settling, and you're hungry. So you head to this really popular restaurant that's in the lobby of the hotel, and you sit down and you have a really, really nice meal. And when you look across from you at a table, you see this loving couple, and it's very clear they're happy and they're celebrating their anniversary. Next morning, you get up, dress yourself all nice and professionally, and you head off to this big tech conference. And the featured speaker of this tech conference is the CEO of the latest tech startup that is taking the world by storm. So it's bigger than TikTok, bigger than any one of them. All right. By this time, you should have formed a picture in your mind of all of these people that I have mentioned. So here's my question for you. What did these people look like? Take a minute and just jot down your description of any of those persons in the chat, and I'll take a look at them. And Julie, the loving couple, they were young and they were well-dressed and they were man and woman. And then, of course, Dr. Palmer said the pilot is a very tall, handsome man. I wonder if it's a certain tall, handsome, no bald-headed man you have in mind, Dr. Palmer. The CEO would be young. Butch Stewart would be the pilot, someone else says. And Jennifer Martin says that the pilot would be a young woman. Julie is suggesting that our tech leader would be a nerdy-looking white man. Brilliant. Thank you all very much for sharing those mental images for me. All right. What about if they look like this? Notice that your mental images didn't match any of the ones that I put up here. All right. My mental image that I'm suggesting, the pilot could have been a black man with really thick dreads. Or what about the couple that they were two men and they were an interracial couple on top of that? And what about the tech CEO being a woman in a wheelchair? Now, it's okay if one or all of your answers didn't fit anything that I had put up here, all right? Because what's happening is that the way our brain functions is that when you get these word pictures, what you do is that the brain immediately goes to what is familiar. Yeah, so you would have an image of a pilot. So Julie's image, for example, was Maria Zadie because Julie knows and she has encountered Maria as a female pilot. Someone else said the pilot could have looked like Butch Stewart. So we're looking at a brown Jamaican male, suggesting some kind of wealth or privilege that would allow him to be in the cockpit. Yeah, so we all would have an image of what the pilot would look like. So you probably wouldn't expect him normally. And I know that I said him deliberately, yes, him to look like Alba Rosie. So I kind of stole that photograph of Alba Rosie from off of the internet and threw it up there. He's actually an Italian dancehall artist. So nothing like what you would expect a pilot to look like. Yeah. What about my couple? Yes, this is actually an interracial gay couple who have been together for many years. Grab that from an article about them. And then what about the CEO? This is a female, and Julie did suggest that her CEO could have been a female, I think. And where the sting is in the tail is that the CEO is in a wheelchair. So even if we pictured her as being female, it would have been unlikely that we would have even have pictured her as being part of the disabled community. Now, these images that we have of different people are shaped by our socialization, shaped by our personal experiences, and I'll share a couple of my personal experiences with you in a little bit. And they're also shaped by representations of different groups or persons, particularly what we see coming at us in the media. And we do know how today, in our current existence, we're bombarded with lots of images and lots of stereotypes of different groups of people. So what happens is that these images kind of function as social filters, and our brain uses them to form intuitive judgments about people. And our brain does that in like milliseconds, right? So we have a very natural tendency to form and to make judgments about people, and our brain uses images that we have due to socialization and experiences and so on to swiftly pull ideas together and help us to make split-second judgments about people that we encounter. So it's a very natural tendency that we engage in. We don't even blink as we're doing it. It's very unconscious, and it's something that we do trillions of times every day. What we need to recognize, of course, is that these unconscious judgments that we make actually impact our attitudes, impact the behaviors that we might undertake toward other people. So we need to take a very close look at what we mean when we talk about hidden bias. Now, I think human beings are natural boxers. Notice how I spell the word boxers. Not talking about fighters and them things, but talking about having the ability to categorize. So we have the ability to put people in boxes naturally and automatically. Yeah. So we're boxing, we're boxers. And it's a necessary ability, as I've mentioned before, because it helps us to order our lives and it helps us when we're making decisions. So it's a really, really important feature of our brain, very important feature of who we are as human beings. And engaging in grouping and categorizing, as I pointed out to you before, is based on their social characteristics, and we do it instinctively. So our brains tend to use visual, verbal, and behavioral clues to categorize other people. Yeah, so for instance, we're going to categorize people in terms of their age. Sometimes we categorize them in terms of gender or ethnicity or even social background, what we can figure out about their educational status or even their sexual orientation, because we're looking for visual clues, whether it's how they speak, how they look, how they self-present, and so on. And we know how useful these clues are to helping us making our way through life, because if we have a sense of who people are, then we know how to treat with them. It's kind of natural because you do want to know if the person that you're interacting with is someone that's going to treat you well, someone that is going to be friendly, or if that person is going to be hostile. And you know, the neuroscientists and sociopsychologists and those kind of people, Dr. Palmer and so on, will tell you that this is part of our evolution, that we needed to learn how to recognize when we're safe and when we're not safe, so we could engage fight or flight. You know, so is it a hostile member of another tribe who could possibly murder you? Is it a saber-toothed tiger or some kind of dinosaur that could consume you? Or is this someone from your group, your in-group, with whom you'll feel safe, and so on? So all a part of us being able to make decisions that could save our lives. So from a sort of human survival standpoint, you could see why these kind of biases are important. But then what we recognize is that over time, the naturalness of being able to do that for flight or fright or just to be in with an in-group has been sort of impacted by how things have changed in our modern society, in our use of technology and so on. And then before we know it, what helped us in a earlier period of our human evolution may not be serving us as well now in our so-called modern / postmodern contemporary space. So it might help us to deal with everyday encounters. You know, if you're going to go visit the dentist or you're going to visit the doctor, then you already know intuitively how that relationship is going to go. Or heaven forbid, you get pulled over by a policeman, then you kind of also have another sense of how that could possibly go. So those rules of behavior can sort of help us to know how to function in common sort of social interactions and help us to behave in socially acceptable ways. And we just make these judgments that can help us to function in that space. But we recognize, of course, that functioning that way is not always helpful. So I'm reminded of Sesame Street. You know, we used to watch Sesame Street a lot, and Sesame Street would have this nice little song. One of these things is not like the others, and they give you 4 things, and there's one that's there, and you know, you have to try to figure out which one doesn't belong. So, which one doesn't belong from my slide? I'll take a response, the first response that I see in the chat. One of these things is not like the other. Which one is it? Can you tell? Drop your answer in the chat. I got an answer. Kaylin says the cat. Thanks, Kadeen, yes, the cat don't belong. That puss sort of very eggs up, as we are saying in Jamaica. The puss a push up himself with meerkat. He's not a meerkat, he's a cat, or some of us would say he's a puss. I love cats, by the way, just so you know. So that's the downside of this rapid categorization that our brains gets involved in it. We may often misread the clues that are there and come up with unconscious judgments that shift us from being able to detect danger and to protect ourselves into forms of social labeling and stereotyping, that hidden biases and that we can call hidden biases or unintended people preferences, because we do prefer certain kinds of people. If you give me a choice between a meerkat and a cat, I'm choosing the cat. That's my bias. That's my preference, my cat preference. Yeah. And we know that where our hidden biases function negatively, they can impact our workplace spaces, the decision that we make to hire people or to retain people, how we interact with those that are our subordinates or those to whom we report. And all of these factors can impact how we treat with each other in the space. So remember, some of the things that we take account of when we're filtering: social identity. So we're going to look at stereotypes based on gender and body and height and even political affiliation, for example. We're going to look at dress. You know, how does a person present? You know, Dr. Perkins, your frock too short today. Or there was a time, Dr. Perkins, your frock was a little too long. You know, how does the presentation of the person cause you to think about them? Or what about how we speak? The accent that we have, the social accent that we have. And we know that we make all kinds of assumptions about a person's education and their skill level based on their social accent or their ability in our space to use or to not use Jamaican English well. You know, so we kind of automatically assume the person dunce or they're of low class because they speak mainly or only Jamaican. And on the basis of that, we figure, maybe this person won't fit in here. And a person who could actually bring great value to our organization doesn't get invited into our space. What about social group and the different kinds of activities that we do? A lot of times in the UWI space, where we encounter each other, if you're sitting on different committees, is by looking at a CV. So you don't know the person, but you see a CV, and you have to make some judgments about the person based on what they're on their CV. And we can make assumptions about a person, for example, their sexual orientation based on the kind of voluntary activities that they get involved in or their areas of research and so on. So I write and I research a lot having to do with gender minorities in or Jamaican/Caribbean space. And I've had a concerned friend call me over and say, you know, you need to be careful. You're probably doing too much of this gender gay thing. People are going to start pigeonholing you. And, you know, some people who don't like gay people might even think you're gay and it might affect your career chances moving forward. And I listened. I didn't stop doing what I was doing, but I recognized the wisdom of what I was being told, because I do know that many of us have these unconscious or hidden biases against people who are gender minorities. I'm sure you can think of one or two examples of your own. To jot them in the chat, I'll happily take account of them. So I'll take a minute, and if you want to jot them in the chat, I'll look at them, and I'll raise them and share them for the other colleagues that are here. So can you think of any circumstances that you might have encountered where one of these things is not like the other? Share with us. All right, seeing two quick ones in the chat. If the accent is foreign, then Tanya says, God help me. And that is so, so true. And then Dr. Sandra says that colorism and locks, and that's so true, because we do grade each other in terms of value by how dark or how light our skin complexion is, or even these days that some of us have chosen to wear locks, you know? So, and Sandra puts in the chat, where's the professor? And I was right there. Sandra, I feel you 100%. I do not look like what Dr. Perkins is supposed to look like. And I have had so many experiences of going to spaces to talk, and people don't know who I am, so they're not expecting me. They're not expecting me, but I show up. So yeah, I feel you 100%. All right. Let me tell you a couple of little stories that may well illustrate some of what we've been talking about today. And yes, the cat has nothing to do with the stories, but I like cats. And one of my stories is about crossing the road. So I'm in Boston, 2018 or so. I'm on sabbatical, and it's this beautiful summer evening, so it's light out and thing. And I'm walking by myself along the road bordering the campus, and I see a group of young men coming towards me. And they're rather loud and they're very rowdy, and I could see they're carrying on. They were all white young men. And I said, them drunk. So I crossed the road. Okay? Tell you a second story. And I suspect a lot of this is resonating with many of you. So feel free to drop a comment or two in the chat. All right. So my spouse and I are watching TV, and some news story comes up about a wanted man, and then the story is accompanied. They put a picture up there of the man. And Patrick turns to me and he looks at me and says, "You look like a damn thief." Why do I look so much like a damn thief? And I'm like, this man is reading my mind again, because I had the very same impression looking at the photograph, that this man looked like a thief. So in one of these several spaces that I sit in as a member of the board, I recently had sight of some documentation pertaining to one of the officers in the organization. And looking through the documentation, I saw her address. And I found myself thinking, huh? She lived down there? Okay. Now, the down there was a so-called volatile community. Now, I need to point out to you that I grew up in Hope Tavern, another volatile community just down there, so from UWI. My final story that I'm willing to share. I remember when I was really, really small, so I might have been 7 or 8. I'm Roman Catholic, obviously. I go to Roman Catholic Church, and I get to church one Sunday, and I encounter a very strange white woman, meaning she's strange because I've never met her before. I would know most of the white women in church, don't it? Right. Anyway, this woman has short hair, she wore sandals, and she dressed very conservatively, skirt below her knee, neutral colors, and so on. So I instinctively called her sister. Sister. Turns out this was a married woman with children. She was not a nun. But I had an image in my mind as to what a nun looked like. And that nun couldn't or didn't look like me. And I was at that point, 30, 40 years ago. Things obviously have changed by then. All right, I'm looking at any comments that you might have put in the chat that I can share. All right. So Ron says, effeminate behaving male, a male with a high-pitched voice. Ro, that is so true. In Jamaica, we make judgments about how a man even moves his hand, how he dresses, and we immediately box him and treat him a certain way. Then Dr. Williams, Sonia talks about her grandmother telling her that a woman of my color should not wear her hair like that. That is natural with rope twists. Miss Sonia, imagine if grandma saw you with hair like mine, where you lock it up really tight. I don't think she'd be pleased. And Tanya, of course, covers her hair. She's considered, because she's a woman of the Muslim faith, to be dumb, to be oppressed, or even from the Middle East. There's no sense that a woman who chooses to express her religious belief by covering could be anything but oppressed. Thank you for reminding us about that. And this conversation and your presence, Tanya, is also reminding us of all the different dimensions of what diversity and inclusion can and does look like in our space. Or Lisa says, if the male dresses too neat, then we're very suspicious of him. We start to wonder if, and we know what that means. All right, thank you very much. there's a lovely training video that was done in India that I'm going to play for you. It's about 6 minutes long, and it looks at hidden bias in the workplace. And I just think it's so good. So let's take a look at it. I want you to take note of how hidden biases function within the workplace, how they get expressed, and what we can do, what we can learn in our context about hidden bias. All right. So here goes a video, short video. Jot your thoughts in the chat. What did you learn from the video? Apart from the fact that young people like to take coffee breaks. Thank you. Hi, Celia. It reinforced for Celia that we all have unconscious bias and that we need to work at it every day just to be more conscious about how it functions in our daily lives. 100% correct. And Sandra is pointing out to us that we're just totally unaware of how our biases function. It's so easy for us to make assumptions about other people. Yeah. Thanks again, Sonia. Prof. Meek says, I thought it was good that this was Indian, with some slight differences to Jamaica, like Madras instead of somewhere downtown, so it didn't feel too personal. Yeah, and I actually was happy that I could find, there's another one I was looking at, Julie, that was actually located in the American space with an African-American woman and a white woman and some African-American boys. And then when I encountered this particular one, I fell in love with it. It was, there's a slight bit of humor in it as well. And because it was from a cultural context that in some ways would be similar to us, where, you know, most people are phenotypically the same, but then there are regional differences, there are gender differences, age differences, and so on. So thanks for validating that. Asanas, yeah, unless it is brought to your attention or you're looking out for it, we do it and we don't know. And we have to re-emphasize that over and over and over again, that if it's not brought to our attention, one, or if we don't decide to be a lot more self-aware, then we might not even be aware of how our biases are impacting people. Yeah, so Jennifer is reinforcing how important it is that we become more aware of our own biases. Killeen says we can learn how to bring it to our awareness in a space of learning and appreciating each other. Wonderful. Thank you very much. I think you did do some good takeaways from that video. Yes, need to bring it to awareness, need to work at it. It has a negative impact on the lives of others, and a lot of it, too much of it, is just totally unconscious, that we're not even aware of it. So a quick summary, and I'm looking at my time and knowing that getting close to wrap up. So we know unconscious bias in and of itself is not a bad thing. We know how it evolved, sort of evolutionary as a response to danger, and it helped to keep the human race alive for all of these millions of years. And it's done that job effectively up to this point. But if evolution is not keeping up with how we are developing socially and technologically and so on, then we could see, and we are aware of how unconscious bias in our spaces can actually be about stereotypes and be about discrimination and so on. It just hasn't kept up with how our cultural and our demographic and technology has changed within the past century or so. So another part of this whole notion of unconscious bias had to do with familiarity and our unconscious brain preferring the safety of what's familiar. And so, like most of us, want to create workspaces where we're comfortable. So we're going to try to create workspaces that contain people that look and think pretty much how we think. And you know what that means is that we craft workspaces that are less diverse, that are less inclusive. So what happens then is that we don't get the opportunity to really grow, for there to be depth of innovation. Because even in and of itself, we recognize the value of diversity, just as diversity. So that's really key and really, really important. So we know from our work in ED&I that diverse teams and inclusive practices produce better results than where we try to craft homogeneous teams and where we function in ways that are exclusive. So we need to invite people to the party. And as our dean reminded us, earlier on, not only do we invite them, but we want them to actually be part of the dance. So sometimes we have to teach them how to dance, and there are lots of ways that we can function to make sure that we craft spaces that are truly inclusive. So I'm going back to my I can marzipan. I can marzipan. I don't hear you, but I want you to say it to yourself. I can marzipan. And marzipan is this sweet. And yeah, that little foolish thing that I made up just to allow us to be able to talk about identifying, committing, and mitigating our unconscious biases. Just by being here today, as has been mentioned before, we have taken the first step of investing in a conversation such as this, which has brought to our awareness what unconscious bias is and how it has an important value, but at the same time, if it's not managed, how problematic it can be. So yes, we all have unconscious biases. You or I might feel that we're not as biased as the other person, and that means that many of us have a bias blind spotting. We tend to consider ourselves to be relatively unbiased compared to other people. So, some of us won't admit that we actually treat other people in ways that are not good because we perceive them, we judge them, we categorize them in a particular way. We can look on though and see how other colleagues have unconscious biases that play out in terms of how they treat other people. So you start to, and you probably are able to point out how your direct report prefers to deal with people who come from a particular island or come from a particular high school or a particular part of the country or of a particular gender. We know all of that, and we can see it in the other person, but we don't see it in ourselves as readily. So part of our time here today is to raise our awareness about its presence in us and working towards identifying and challenging those biases that we have and the blind spot that we might have around our own biases. Some of the stuff that we can do is certainly challenge blind spots in other people when we see it, but also be open to having our own blind spots be challenged, yeah? And really work hard to listen if someone gives us an indication of something that we might be doing that might be an indication of unconscious bias at work. Try to create the safe opportunities among trusted colleagues and subordinates and managers and so on to have your unconscious biases reflected back at you so that you can recognize and act on them. Be willing to have open and honest conversations among yourselves about those biases. And I'm not in any way suggesting that this is an easy thing for us to do. It's not easy, all right? But raising awareness and interacting and trying to become our best and better selves is what our human purpose surrounds. So that's what we're being called to do. I think we should also commit ourselves to controlling the impact of our biases on the lives of other people. So we can do small things by giving the other person the benefit of the doubt, try to do small things differently. So say, for example, that you're in a space where you tend to always want to invite one colleague or one person who reports to you to lead a meeting or to give feedback, so you tend to pick on this person because you have an expectation that the person will give good feedback, that the person thinks in a way that's similar to you. The other people may not be as comfortable. There are any number of reasons that we could give. My suggestion is that we commit ourselves to doing things a little bit differently by asking more questions of more people, inviting more people to participate in spaces so that they don't feel excluded. So ask someone else to lead the discussion and make opportunities where you're in spaces where someone hasn't shared in a meeting, even though they might have been invited to. We can have a one-way conversation with them, and that conversation can be meaningful to us as well, because we can certainly learn from them what's going on and what unconscious biases we might be projecting that they are responding to. Yeah. Also, because unconscious biases lead to split-second decisions, perhaps what we need to do is slow down, take some time before we make decisions. Yeah. Take that deep breath and hold it, and then release it, and then consider making a decision, consider making a point, consider responding to something that's said to you or done to you. always examine our own behavior and our own responses. Always ask ourselves, why do we do it? Why? And who is harmed or hurt by what we do? And always remember that the opportunity will always be there, as we say in Jamaica, to wheel and come again. So those are my thoughts on I Can Marzipan. If you have any thoughts, please jot them in the chat. And I'm seeing that there are already some thoughts there that people have decided to share. Yeah, and I'm going back up to Tania. Tania says, it can't be stressed enough. We all have it, and it has to be kept in check. We have to reflect on them and do not let them affect our judgment to the point where it affects how we relate to other people. And that bears saying over and over and over and over again. Asenes is reminding us that we treat lightly as a joke what may come across to someone else as offensive. And that can be a reflection of the unconscious bias out of which we're giving this joke, you know? So Jamaican people say, what a joke to you, you know, Koba say, what a joke to you is that to me? Exactly that. And it will be important for us to continue to remind ourselves of that. And we're going to make mistakes, you know, because that's what it means to be human. But part of the learning and the commitment and the mitigation is to make sure that when we recognize what we're doing and how we're functioning, that we put ourselves in spaces that we can apologize to people, that we can make efforts to not do things that way again, and so on. So we can make efforts to work at repairing the harm that has been done. So I'm seeing here Troublesome Yolanda, who got me into this, making a comment. Thanks, Jules. And certainly you are correct. Kudos to our colleagues in FMS for giving us this space for this reflective conversation. Hey, June. June says, just because you're in the FMS space, do you want to say something on how this bias can negatively impact the patients in a healthcare professional patient-doctor relationship? June, you are spot on. One of the things I'm researching and writing on now, and if you remember, June, you pointed me to this article about a Rasta man that ended up in the hospital. He needed some kind of surgery and care, and the professionals refused to take care of him until he cut his locks. Can you imagine? His locks had absolutely nothing to do with the surgery that he needed, but they forced him to cut his locks because there was a perception that him being locked was about dirtiness and uncleanness and so on. And if you ask them, they probably wouldn't even say that that was the reason. So you're spot on. There are spaces, all our professional and personal spaces, that can be impacted by our unconscious bias, and we constantly need to remind ourselves and check ourselves, you know, the little saying, check yourself before you wreck yourself. That I can marzipan. Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Palmer. Good to have others invited to the party for sure, and asking them to dance. And you are right that we should ask them to take their playlist. And that would really be inclusion, because then we'll be invited to dance to their music as well, not simply them dancing to our music. Excellent point. So we invite them to the party, we invite them to dance, but we also should invite them to share with us their playlist so that we can dance to what moves them. Rowan says, can bias include overcompensating in how we serve a visually impaired or dwarf student, etc., versus a regular person? In some cases, it may well be, because then what you might be doing is that you might not be allowing the person to reflect the strength of who they are. So think about that video that we just watched from India, where Akshay treated the older colleague on the basis of his unconscious bias. He figured that the man was disabled, so he wouldn't be able to move up and down. There is a way that when we work towards diversity, when we work towards inclusion, when we work towards equity, we have to make compensatory moves for others that are less able. So just think about that little diagram, that little image that we get sent all the time, these three boys looking over the fence at a football match or whatever it is that's being played. And they're all different heights, and they're all being put on the same level box in order to peep over. So you know that means that If the guy is really tall, then the box makes him even taller. If he's really short, the box is not going to help him to see over the fence. And if he's in between, he may just be able to peep right at the fence and so on. So we recognize that part of including someone is that we have to treat them differently in order to bring them to a space where they can be equal, yeah, or can be, Ron, I'm using your words, be regular. Yeah. So we need to recognize where we're called upon to treat people differently so that they may be treated equally. But we also have to be careful that we don't get to the point where we mistreat people so that we figure that they are unable and don't allow them to express the abilities that they have and to share those. So we shouldn't automatically assume. So like Akshay did once he realized what he ought to have done is that he asked Mr. Mishir, or whatever his name was, Mirage, what did he think? Could he do it? And was he able? Was he not only able, but was he also willing? And once we get that response, then we know how to compensate or not, how we need to interact with the persons. Celia, thank you very much for that point. All right, so I'm going to close off, but here's what I need you to do. I'm going to do another visualizing exercise with you. So I again need you to close your eyes again and form a picture in your mind as I describe these persons and in these scenarios for you. All right. So you're in a classroom on campus. You're in the programming lecture and the lecturer walks in. All right. Class is over and you and the friends are sitting under the tree. And you start to scroll through Facebook and you see a post from a friend congratulating a couple for adopting a child. Eventually you find your way home, and on the way home, you know, in the taxi you hear some discussion that says that the current Governor General of Jamaica is stepping down and we're in for a big surprise as to who this Governor General is, and there's going to be a discussion on TVJ or CVM News Tonight, and you run home and rush to turn on the TV because you want to see. So here's my final question for you. And of course, as usual, place your comments or even your questions in the chat. What did these people look like? And did your image of them change because of the conversation that we had this afternoon? So put your thoughts in the chat and then we'll open up to questions. So what did you know the professor look like? What did the couple look like? What did their child look like? And we can talk about it and segue from there into questions. I think Dr. Lindo is probably going to pick back up again and monitor our question and answer segment. So feel free for now just to jot your answers in for me. I want to see if, having taken in some of what we've said today, if it made any difference at all. Why not? And then we'll open up for chat. So what did the professor look like? All right, and thank you all for your really, really kind words. I really, really appreciate that. What we're talking through today has been helpful for so many of you. Thank you. So Tanya says the best approach is to ask the disabled. Okay, so we're going, yeah, I'll take account of this because this was from before, to ask the disabled person. This is Ron, this is a response. Tanya, one of our excellent nurse educators here at UWI Mona, is saying we should ask the disabled person. And you know, many times we make decisions for disabled persons, but those assumptions are not often correct. So she's pointing out to us, for example, that autism exists on a spectrum, and people who are autistic have different ways of interacting with their reality and their community. And in fact, Tanya, we could even think through that in another way, because autism may be even one tiny window into unconscious bias. Many people are on the autistic spectrum, and again, I'm speculating here, no expertise whatsoever to go with this, but they don't have some of the filters that we have. So they may well be even less impacted by the kind of biases that we're thinking through and talking about right now. Hi, Prof. Williams. Good to have you. Thanks for joining us, Principal FIC. And Prof. Williams is saying that he agrees with Tania that those to be affected ought to be brought to the table for the brainstorming as well as the decision-making process. And that's a key principle of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Julie, in answer to my last question, is saying that she has consciously expanded her ideas as to who these people might be. And I'd love for Julie to tell us, and for any one of these, what her image looked like. And Ron is thanking Tania for her guidance. And then June is saying, Prof, a short lady in colorful clothes. And I really hope it's not me pointing fingers at June Weasley Holness, but yeah, the Prof could be a short lady in very colorful clothes. And Dr. DeBrun says the examples were excellent. Make sure they're getting into a guidance book. We can all work on something together as a group, as a committee. All right. So, friends, I'm going to stop right there. And thank you for your time and your attention. I suspect that one or two of you want to actually ask some live questions or just to give some live comments. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn back over to Dr. Lindo. And thanks to you all again. It was good.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Perkins. That was really enlightening, and I like the interaction. This was really good interaction. So I must say that how I started to think of the persons surely changed at the end of your lecture. I wasn't thinking along the same lines anymore. So I am really appreciative of the talk, and it has really opened my mind a lot. So we are open to questions, and let's just see if anybody has any questions for us.
And there are other members of the ED&I team here, so feel free to address them. Dean, put on your camera. Dr. DeBrun, put on your camera. David Miguel can put on his camera. He's a member of the FMS subcommittee, and Lisa has her camera on as well. So lovely opportunity for an open interaction and exchange. So go right ahead and engage us. Thank you.
Sandra, you have a question, Sandra?
What I would like to say, the whole activity of preparing your lectures for students, many of us use pictures, photographs to convey certain messages to our students, right? But I mean, and I am one of those persons, I like to use a lot of photographs to create or to, especially when I'm teaching remotely, I use a lot of pictures. But now I'm realizing that I have to critically look at those pictures because there might be a hidden message in the picture that I'm oblivious to because I'm not really looking for it, right? I'm so focused on the message that I want to convey that I am not really paying attention to the other messages that the picture or the photograph could be conveying, right? Anna, could you say anything on that?
That's an excellent point, Sonia. I'll answer it by an example. Several years back, before she retired, I remember there was an academic board where Professor Carleen Cooper took the university campus to task because we had put together this poster, and there was a male and a female being represented. And I think if I'm recalling, Carleen not here, so she can't kill me, but the guy was dark and the girl was this very beautiful, fair-skinned girl.
Brown girl.
Yeah, man, a brown girl. And Carleen
was
that we had a pattern at Mona for putting out images with brown-skinned girls and neglected the fact that there were dark-skinned women who were a part of our space. And I remember that there were some colleagues that were so upset, and they were thinking that, go here, Carleen, come again with her foolishness and all that. But she was spot on. The images that we put out there speak to what we value. So, just as how I challenge, and Tania knows this, that I've asked my nursing colleagues before when they put their brochure together, do they include a male on it, and Tania, because we know nursing tends to attract mainly women, but do we want it to become a space where we recognize that men are welcome, that a man can be as much a nurse as a woman, and so on. So that is absolutely important, that we must examine the images that we use. So I'm very careful. You'll notice that when I choose images, unless I intend to use someone who is white, my images will not include white people. I'm not racist, but I also know the messages that get sent when we continue to validate a certain way of being beautiful and so on, that doesn't affirm what I look like and the spaces that I'm from. So it's very important that we remember about images. Thank you.
I'd like, if anyone wants to ask a question or make a comment in our conversation, could you just please click on the reaction button at the bottom of the screen? You will see an icon that you can raise your hand so that we can acknowledge you. All right, it's an icon with a little smiley face and a plus to the top of it. You just click on that and you'll see. Okay, Yolanda, could you unmute so we can hear you?
Hi guys.
Hi, Yolanda. Go ahead.
You know what I'm so let me say I'm really proud of the FMS team for initiating this conversation. It's an excellent conversation. And thank you very much, Anna, for being here and sharing with us. I wanted to kind of go back to your question, Sonia. I think sometimes it's important for us when we do up our presentations to ask our students how they feel about what they're seeing. Because it would be nice to hear, because, I've had that experience before where students see something on a screen and they may not necessarily raise their hand in the class and say, Miss, I don't like this, or Miss, I don't like that. But they will come to you after and they'll be like, Miss, XYZ is a case. I didn't really like that image and it made me feel away. And I think sometimes some students may not do that because they're not really sure how the lecturer or the tutor may react. So I think we would never always get it right. We will always put up something and it may affect no one, but it may affect everyone, or it may affect one person. But it's always good to ask, how do you feel about this? Is it representative of you and what you're doing and how you're feeling about it? I think that's very important in that space of lecturing.
Thank you, Yolanda. Anyone else? Yes, Tanya, go ahead, please.
I think one of the things that we have to think about is where we live. We live in the Caribbean and we live in Jamaica. And Jamaica is like a melting pot. We have to move away from this image that everybody have to look a certain way. We are a very diverse community, right? And we need to represent that everywhere. I think I have been at the university for many years, over 15 years now. And I listen to your words and I know what you're referring to, Sonia, that, we use a lot of pictures and we have to wonder, what our students are going to think about this or that. For example, in the nursing books, the majority of our books are coming from North America, and you know how the pictures will look like, right? So, but we are living now the times of the global village, and globalization, and we have to move away from what makes us different and think about what makes us similar. And I think the whole image of our university, our society, our classroom, our faculty, it has to be diverse. What we put out there in our website, how our students look like, there have to be efforts to show that we are all different. I am Jamaican. I consider myself Jamaican. I have been here the majority of my adult life and I look different. My son was born in Jamaica and is half Jamaican and looks totally different to the majority of the population of this country, right? So I don't want him to feel excluded either. So the only way we can improve the future is to have everybody in, and this is why this is so important, equity, diversity, and inclusion. It's not what I think is politically correct. It's to have everybody come to the conversation so we have all the points of view and come to a consensus or a compromise, Let us all be represented because we are out of many, one people. That's the motto of this country, isn't it? Out of many, one people. So it cannot be we look like this or we look like that. We have to think more like that. We're part of a global village and it's represented more and more in our society.
That's a really important point, Tania. And it's a point that I think we need to constantly reinforce as we do it. Because like Yolanda says, how will our students receive it? You know, what meaning will they take away? And it's beautiful that we can have someone like you as part of our group that reinforces the diversity of who we are. You know, so that I nod with you 100% on that perspective. Thank you.
What Tanya did not say is that she's also a member of the FMS group.
I couldn't say no to that. I had to be there.
And we wanted her there. I mean, if we tell you who our members are, we're so diverse, it's not funny. You know, we're so different, but as I said, we are alike in many ways. All right, any other comments or any other questions for us? I'm not seeing anyone else with their hands up. You're seeing anything? No one else with their hands up? Yes. Well, if we have no other questions, we have Tanya, you could speak to this in terms of the questionnaire, the feedback questionnaire.
Yes, this work that we are doing is so important, and we cannot do this work without your feedback. So I have placed in the chat a link to a Google form that will allow you to give us some feedback. Please, you're so kind. It's very short. It will be immediate. You can access it right now and you can answer the question. These questions are for us, for our work internally. Will inform what we do. And if you want more of this, this is the way to go. Let us know if you like this conversation today, how you like it. Let us know a little bit about yourselves and let us know what you would like to hear about in the next conversation, God willing, if we are here. So please don't leave without doing this. And we haven't finished, so please don't go nowhere. Thank you.
So we're going to give you around 5 minutes to complete this. So as Tanya says, please don't leave. Just stay with us and complete the form because it's very valuable information for us in terms of how we can serve you better. All right, how will we structure our next reflective conversation so it can better inform persons who attend? All of that information is extremely important to us as a group, as a team. Okay, so we'll give you 5 minutes, please.
And it's completely anonymous. We will not know who answered.
Yeah.
Okay, so don't be shy.
Okay, has everyone been able to complete the form? We thank you for completing the forms. I will now turn over to Janet McIntosh. She's a lecturer from the radiography program, and she will close us off for the afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of our Dean, Dr. Tomlin Paul, and our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion team, thank you for participating in our reflective conversation on unconscious bias. Very special thanks to Dr. Anna Perkins for her excellent and engaging conversation that she had with us this afternoon. I hope the conversation will help us to become more aware, more conscious of our own biases. I hope that individually we reflect on our own biases, make the appropriate changes in our actions and our behaviors as we move towards embracing equity, diversity, and inclusion. Thank you.